Hello everybody and welcome to another TD channel video. Today we are gonna start a series of videos in which we're gonna cover the process of exporting camera data between two applications using JSON. So in this first part we're gonna concentrate in just moving data out of Maya. But before we start moving data out of Maya, we need to set up our environment so that things can read properly. So depending on how experienced you are with programming with Python, one of the things that you will know, or maybe you don't know, is that Python has a very specific order in which it loads its modules, and there's a very specific list of places where it's going to look for those modules. So before we get started, what we're going to do, I'm on Macintosh over here, so I'm going to demonstrate on how it works on a Linux environment. Later on, we'll probably do a little bit on how we can do this under Windows. But basically what we need to do is set the environment variable that's called Python path. So if I go over here and I do echo Python path, you're going to see that I have several directories here, but the one that we're interested is this one right here, that it points to my desktop and then several of other folders, and at the end it finds this file called JSON. So that is one of the locations where Python's going to look for modules when it tries to load them. So let's go ahead and make sure you set that up. In Linux applications, depending on the shell you're using, you can do that with the export command, or sometimes you might have to do set. So setting environment variables is something that I think every technical director should know. If you don't know it, then we'll probably have another video on what environment variables are and how they're set up. So I'm not going to cover that here. So just remember that you need to have the Python path environment variable set to a location where you're going to be doing work. In our case, there's a folder called JSON on my desktop. So let's look around here, and one of the things we're going to do is we're going to launch Maya. So let's go ahead and open Maya first. So with Maya open, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my little editor over here. And as you can see, I already have some commands here, but you can ignore those for now. Actually, we won't be needing this guy. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open a scene file that I have prepared for this. It's called camera export. And as you can see here, I have a camera called TDC camera 001. And it's a very simple scene. It just has a cube with a plane, and the camera starts looking down on it, and it is going to swing around. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to export this 48 frames of animation into a JSON file. To do that, we're going to go ahead and first we're going to set up a new Python module, and in that Python module we're going to create a file called, actually no, let me correct myself, we're going to create a package that's going to be called TDC JSON, and inside of that package we're going to create a module called Maya Camera, which is where we're going to do all of our work. So how do we create a package? Let's go over to our shell, and right now I am pretty much in that directory that, as I mentioned earlier, it was already under Python path. So let me show you guys again. So this directory right here and this here pretty much match. So right now what it's going to do is inside of JSON is going to look for that package. So the package name, if you guys remember, it was called TDC JSON. So we're going to go ahead and create a directory, TDC JSON, and we're going to move into it. Right, so now we're in here. Now to turn this folder into a package, usually what you have to do is add a file called __init. So we're going to do that with a simple touch command, .py. So this folder right now has pretty much become a package now. And you could import it, but we really don't have anything in here. If I do a list, that's the only file we have. So we're going to go ahead and create this file over here called Maya Camera. So we're going to do Vim. That's my favorite text editor, and I'm just going to do Maya camera.py. Let's make sure that that's the correct name. Yes, so we start. Here we have our text editor. So the first things I like to do is I like to come up with a plan for what I'm going to write. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of imports of the modules that I know I'm going to need. So we're going to first import the OS module and the JSON module. And then also we're going to import the Maya commands module. So that and this here at the end as CMDS is something that a lot of Python coders use, because from now on, instead of having to type maya.cmds every time I try to access a command from this module, all I have to do is type this. So it's a lot simpler. I don't do that for these ones over here because they're already short enough. So just in case you're not familiar with this way of importing data. So I'm going to create one function here, and it's going to be called export camera. And then here we're going to close this. I like to put usually a little bit of documentation here. Export my camera to JSON. Okay, and then let's look at the different steps that we're going to need to be able to make this this exporter work. Well, the first thing that we're going to need to do is make sure that the user has provided a camera. If they haven't provided a camera, then we don't know what to export. So we're gonna go ahead and type these comments here. I'm just gonna do first. Let's make sure a camera is provided. And I usually like to code like this, just gather my thoughts before I even start working. So we're going to do that. Then one of the things we're going to do is we're going to check if a file name is provided. So check if file name is provided, because we're going to be exporting a file, so we have to give a file name. And then at the end we're gonna gather information about the camera. And then we are going to loop over all the frames in the animation and store that data. So I'm going to give this guy a write. And one of the things I like to do is just make sure that all my environment is set up properly. So the first thing I'm going to do up here is I'm just going to do a simple print statement. There we go. We do print hi. So now we're going to go to our Maya environment, and we're going to go ahead and run this, which basically imports the Maya commands over here. Actually, we don't really need that line. I just usually load it in because just in case I need to do a little bit of testing. But we're going to go ahead and import this guy as MC. This line here, I usually put it in my script editor because I'm constantly reloading the module as I make more changes. And then we're going to run the export camera. So if I take this, select everything, and export, you're going to see right here it says hi, and that is printed as soon as we call this. So you can keep calling this one line right here, and it's just going to say hi. So that lets me know that we are finding the function, and we are able to move on forward right now. So let's think about our camera right now, this export camera procedure, and how it's going to work. And when you think about it, there's several ways that it can work. Maybe the user has a camera selected. If they're in an interactive session, they go ahead and they select the camera. They're over here, they go to perspective view, and then they're like, okay, select my camera, run this, and then it exports that. But what if their user is trying to run this in batch mode? Like in a farm, because they're trying to run the same operation in 50 different files. This is the kind of things that you have to think as a technical director. And for that case, what you want to do is you want to give the user the ability to put the camera into the command as a parameter. So what I do here is I usually I'm going to give it a camera, and I'm going to initialize this with a value of none, which is also equivalent to null, or nothing has been defined by default. And then let's think about what else we're going to need to export the camera. We're going to need the file name. And the file name, when you stop and think about it, how can we get it? Well, if we are in a live session, the user will probably want a little pop-up dialog to come up where they can choose where the file is going to go. You know, very interactive, user-friendly. But once again, what if you're going to put this on a batch process? So I like to type in here file name equals none. Right? So right now we've created a couple of parameters to this function that are optionals because we already give it a default value. So if the user doesn't provide any of this, those values are going to come back none. So we're going to go down here, and this first part right here is not really the meat and potato of how everything is, of how the script is developed, but it's absolutely necessary if you want to write a good quality module. You know, you want to make sure that you have all the information you need before you run all of your data. So the first thing we're going to do, like I said, is we're going to check if the camera has been provided. So let's go over here and just do if not camera, and then we indent. And then if the user didn't pass a camera up here as a parameter, then we're going to get the current selection. So selection is equals to CMDS list, and then selection equals true, right? So we got the selection, and then, but what if the user hasn't selected anything and they run the script because they don't really know how it works? So we need to check for that also. So if nothing is selected, stop, because we don't want to move on forward. So we're going to do here if len, and this is a function that just gives you the length of an array. If length of selection is equal 0, this means that nothing has been selected. We're going to print you must select a camera to export, right? And then we're going to exit out of the function. So actually, you know what? Because it is a function, maybe we don't want to kill the Python process, because that's what this will do. It will kill the Python process. So what we're going to do is we're going to return a value of -1. This is a common practice. If you return a value other than 0, that means something went on. So for now, we're going to return a value of -1. Then what happens if the user has selected more than one thing? And that's another thing we have to check. So if more than one item is selected, stop also. So another test, if len of selection is greater than 1, we're going to print you must select a single camera to export. Okay, and once again return -1. We save that thing, and then our final test that we need to run is we have to make sure that the actual object that was passed is a camera. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to override the value of camera, which remember usually comes in here. We're going to override it with the current selection so that we can get out of this little test right here. So I'm going to go here and then just do a little note here. If there is only one thing selected, let's store it. So camera equals selection, the first item of our selection, because selection, this command right here, cmds ls, if you look at documentation, it returns an array. So camera has been initialized to the first element of that array, and now we can move on to another test. So we're going to do if, we're going to make sure the selected object is indeed a camera, because they could have just selected something else. So we're going to do here if cmds.nodeType of camera, and then close this, equals to transform. And this is just in the case that the user selected the transform node, which in Maya, if you select anything and then you look at the attribute editor, you're going to see right here that a lot of times, I mean, right now we selected the shape, but sometimes when you're selecting, it actually goes ahead and select this. So we want to go ahead and protect and make sure that everything is good. So if the selection is indeed a transform, then we probably should look one level deep and see if that is indeed a camera. So if it is a transform, we're going to move on forward and say camera shape is equals to CMDS list relatives, and we're going to give it camera, and then we're going to give it the children. So this is going to list all the relatives, and then we're going to get the first element that comes out of the current selection just to see if it's a children. Then finally, we're going to do right here, if children is a camera, then we continue. So here we're going to do if cmds.nodeType camera shape equals to camera. Actually, let's test the other way around. If it is not a camera, then we should once again return out of here. So let's do a print this, let's do capital here, the selected object is not a camera. Return -1. Okay, so right now we've done a good deal of tests. Let's go ahead and try to run this and make sure that we don't have any typos or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and reload this guy. Okay, it compiled, so it looks like it could be correct. So let's see what happens if we run it with nothing selected. It tells you, you must select a camera to export. When you look up here, that's the first test. There's nothing selected. That's what it's going to intercept. So what if we select something that is more than one object? The second test, we do this. We run this guy again. You must select a single camera to export. So we're in good shape so far. And then we're going to test the last one to make sure that the current selection is indeed a camera. So what happens if I go over here and select just the plane and run this guy? This is going to tell you global name children is not defined. Okay, let's see if we did something else. Children, actually here I needed an equal true, because we're going to test, we're trying to get the children of this object with this list relative. So because I made a change in the code, that means I have to reload. So we are going to enable this guy, then this guy right here, and render, and it tells you again, the selected object is not a camera with result -1. Now if we select the camera and we run that guy, it's just going to run through with no error. So far our testing is going pretty good. Let me go over here and minimize this guy because it keeps getting on our way. So now we have to run the same kind of tests for the file name to see if it is if it has been provided and everything is correct. We're going to go over here, if not file name. So if the file name was not provided, then bring up a file dialog. And here we're going to get a little bit into Maya GUI processing, and it's pretty easy. So I'm just going to type a couple of things here really quick. Basic filter equals JSON, return value is equal to cmds.file dialog 2. This is a new file dialog that was introduced in the latest versions of Maya. And then we're going to go ahead and do dialog style equals 2, and then fm equals 0. So what this is going to do is bring up a pop-up dialog, and it's going to store whatever you selected there is going to store it in ret val, which is return value. So now we have to test that. If a file was selected, if ret val. So what happens if it was selected? Well, let's get the file extension. So I do file extension equals os.path.splitExt, which means split the extension of ret val 0, which is the first element of the array. And we know we're only going to be able to get one because this flag right here, fm equals 0, it means that the file dialog can only return one file at a time. It cannot return multiple. I believe file multiple is what this stands for. So we know it's only going to be one file if it was indeed selected. So we go here and we store those two values. And with that, we're going to make a couple of internal changes. So because sometimes the user might just type the name foo and not give it an extension. So if he doesn't give us an extension, we have to give it an extension so that the user can find it. So if the extension is not *.json, let's add it. So we're going to do if extension is not equal to .json, we're going to do file name equals file plus .json. So we have attached the value of .json to the file, and we're storing it in file name, which is the exact same name of the, we go up here, you're gonna see that it's the exact same name as the parameter that was supposed to be passed in. And actually I can spot a little typo right here. This has to be capital N. So now that we know that the file name is correct, we are gonna go ahead and do but we forgot to check for another test. So what happens if the user actually does give it the file JSON? So if it's not provided, add it, else. That's the other thing that can happen. We're going to do file name is going to be equal to ret val 0. Okay, so at this point we're pretty much ready to move on forward. Let's give that guy a test. We're going to reload this guy, run it, and we have our dialog. I can go over here and do test. And you know what? We forgot to add a print statement or something to let us know that we did things right. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Print file name. Alright, so let's move back over here. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the invocation so you guys can see how the parameters are used. So I'm going to say camera is going to be equal to, and then we select this guy right here, and we can see that this is the name of the camera. So I'm just going to copy this guy and paste it right here. And now we can run this, and you see, even without a selection, because I'm explicitly giving it the name of what I'm trying to export, oops, it should run. Let's see. Yeah, it still works. It knows that it's trying to export, and I'm going to do test dot, or just test with no JSON. And let's see. Oh, we forgot to reload it. Sorry. So if we reload this guy, we run it again. If I do just test, it's going to tell us test us JSON with the full path of where it's going to try to save the file. So at this point, we're pretty good shape. Now it's time to get into the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to export. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to capture the frame start, and this is going to be cmds.playback options. And then I'm going to capture query equals true and min equals true. So I'm telling the system, give me the minimum frame on the playback range. I'm going to copy this frame, put it right here, and do end, and change this to max. So now we have the first and the last frame stored. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start assembling on our data that's going to go out. So we're going to do out data equals, it's going to be an object. So what we're going to put in here is camera name, and that's going to be camera, right? Then we're going to do frame start, which all of this is data that pretty much every camera exporter is going to need. So frame start also, frame end, we're also going to add the horizontal and vertical field of views. This is something that it's pretty useful to have. So we're going to do vertical field of view, and then we're going to do cmds.camera, and then we're going to query, and we're going to do vertical field of view equals true. Copy and paste that guy. Now change this to horizontal. Horizontal field of view. Alright, so we have our camera name, our frame start, frame end, vertical field of view, horizontal field of view. And now what we need is a place to store all our frames. So I'm going to do frames right here, and I'm going to initialize frames to an object, and the first element of the object. So basically, this frame is gonna have an object that's gonna have a whole bunch of different things in it. So one of the elements of it is going to be matrix world, and that's going to be initialized to another object. So basically, when you're looking up your data, you're going to find the frames key, and then you're going to tell it, give me your matrix world, and then you have everything you need. So that being done, the last thing we have to do on this should be pretty straightforward. We're going to iterate over all the frames and capture all the information we need. So we're going to do for I in range, and then the range is going to be frame start to frame end plus 1, because frame end is non-inclusive. And then we're going to set the current frame. So we're going to do cmds current time equals to I. We're going to get the camera matrix in world space. So we're going to do out data frames matrix world, right? So here we're referencing this object right here and this one in here. So we're referencing that, and we're going to do that, and then we're going to set the first key to be a string representation of the current frame. So string I, and that is going to be equals to that's going to be equals to cmds.xform, and the xform command takes several flags. The first one is the camera, or the object that we're going to try to have an effect on. Then we're going to query, and then we're going to tell it that we want the matrix, and then we're going to tell it that we want that in world space. So that's the out data, and then once we're done looping through all the frames, we're going to do a quick little cmds.current time equals frame start, just so that we don't move the playhead all the way to the end and just leave it there. So now you have everything stored in out data. So at this point we're going to do JSON, and like I mentioned earlier, it's pretty easy. You just do file out. Let's put a little note here. Save data to JSON. So we're going to file out is equals to open file name with write flag, and then we're going to do JSON dump which object? Out data. Where into f out, and then usually, like I said, just for reading purposes it's nice to indent it, but for consumption you don't really need it. But you know what, let's just go ahead and do it this way. So file out, and then we're going to do indent equals 4. Oh, or we can do 2 so it's not too big. Then finally we're going to close this, close the file out handle, and finally print exported successfully to, and then we're going to give it the file name. All right, that pretty much wraps our script. So as you can see here, the meat and potatoes of the script happens from frame 53 to frame 80. So it's less than 30 lines of code, and you know, we have some comments here, so you need very little code to be able to accomplish what we're trying to do. So let's go over here and test it again. Oops, I don't have my mouse here and I don't have a numeric keypad, so sometimes I just type things a little wrong. So we're going to export this, and we're going to tell it we want this to go into test.json and save. So you saw the camera moved all over the place and then it went back. Let's see, we got a little user error right here. Let's see what it could be. IO error 2. Maybe it couldn't. Oh, I forgot. I put read instead of write. So this should be write right here. And let's get rid of this print file name because we don't really need it. Let's go back to our frame. We're going to run this whole thing again. Test.json. Done. Exported successfully to this location. So now if I go here, if I just do cat, if I go up one level, test.json, you're going to see right here, this is the whole 48 frames that we need to export this data. So if I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. Oops, a little too long. And you're going to see here, frame start is set to 1.0, horizontal field of view, it stores it, frame end 48. Then we have frames, which is an object. The first key of that object is called matrix world. And here we have an entry for every frame. And you see they're completely out of order, 42, 48, 43. It doesn't really matter because it's a hash table and it's really fast to look it up, most languages. If we keep going down at the bottom, we have the vertical field of view and the camera name. So that's pretty much all we had to do to export our data. So now we have everything on this file that is in a file format that we can use anywhere. So in the next part of this video, we're going to write a very quick importer for Blender, and we're going to be able to move, compare the two cameras and make sure that they match. Thank you very much, and talk to you guys later.